Hello, America. Welcome to the Glennbeck Wednesday night special. We are less than 2 weeks away, I hear, from a monumental election. We could use an election that's not monumental for a change. You know, we need the regular, boring, run-of-the-mill election with nothing major at stake, but we ain't going to get that one this time. Ultimately, what's at stake in this election is truth and freedom, the freedom to pursue the truth. This week, I released my new book. It's called Propaganda Wars: How the Global Elite Control What You See, Think, and Feel. That last word is something that, if we have time, we're going to explore today. Otherwise, we'll do it tomorrow. How do you have somebody else control how you feel? You will explain. Like most of my books, this one is really timely and urgent because it exposes what I call in the book the propaganda industrial complex. Now, this is the vast network of governmental agencies, international organizations, mainstream media, and corporations, especially big tech companies, all working together to systematically gain more power, influence, and control over your life. In the book, I show you how they're doing this, the tools that they're using to increase control and erode core freedoms, and I give you a practical strategy guide to resist and fight back. Now, propaganda isn't new, of course. Edward Bernays was the guy who really brought propaganda into the American century. It was now called advertising, but originally it was called propaganda. And propaganda wars have been raging for all of human history. But the weapons of propaganda war have changed. During the Cold War, the CIA printed millions of books and pamphlets, including copies of George Orwell's Animal Farm. They tied them to large balloons and floated them into countries behind the Iron Curtain. Now, propaganda gets beamed directly into your hand, and it won't be long before it is beamed directly into your head. The messages created by the propaganda industrial complex is increasingly coordinated and pervasive. Unless you've been living under a rock the last 4 years, you've heard multiple versions of this.
This is par for the course for what they do. He sent out a clarion call that has invoked not only violence, but also dangerous rhetoric, threats to the lives of everyday people who are just trying to go to work and go to school.
Okay, Hitlerian. That seems to be their broken record since her campaign has started to fall apart on the whole joy thing that was so fake. Dangerous rhetoric invoking violence. This has been a constant refrain for years. Meanwhile, a far left-wing group called In Decline recently put on a so-called art show at a gallery in Los Angeles in which visitors could kick around a realistic latex mock-up of Donald Trump's head. Okay. Yeah, but that's not a problem, is it? This art group, In Decline, first kicked around the latex Trump head during the last presidential election. Now, this is what visceral propaganda looks like. This is what Hitler did. Now, which side is invoking violence again? Which one? Election years always bring an intense amount of propaganda from both sides. We know that. It's called campaigning. But for the Harris-Walz campaign, however, the usual propaganda is getting an enormous boost and signal boost from mainstream media. Now, here's what this typically looks like.
So I just want to ask you yes or no. At any point in your life, have you served 2 all beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun, working at a McDonald's? Yes or no? That's it.
I have.
Okay. Now the other job.
But it was not a small job. Like, I did the fries. I mean,
Okay. Now check out the difference in the way ABC's Good Morning America reported each pick for vice president. I don't have time to play the full report, but just check out the difference in the setup for each. Here's how they framed the J.D. Vance announcement.
Donald Trump called J.D. Vance just 20 minutes before he announced his pick to the world on social media. And unlike last time, when Trump picked the establishment Republican Mike Pence, this time he is changing the game. A transformational pick for his vice presidential candidate. Once, as you say, a fierce Trump critic, now a full-blown convert to Trump's MAGA movement.
A full-blown convert. It's like a cult. Now, here's the Tim Walz setup just 3 weeks later.
Governor Walz's rise to the Democratic ticket has been meteoric. In a matter of days, he went from being a relatively unknown politician to leading the party's attacks on Trump and J.D. Vance. And now he is racing to introduce himself to the American people.
She's very excitable. It's pretty unbelievable, but we're used to it. The left is very thorough with their Harris propaganda, even trying to whitewash the man they hope will become the first gentleman, Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff.
There's a pop culture phrase, wife guy, which you've kind of been known as. Are you familiar with this?
I've heard about it.
As called a wife guy, a proud wife guy? How do you feel about that?
Well, if I do something annoying to Kamala and she gets upset, I'll just show her that article.
Right.
I'm trying.
Or a t-shirt or a mug.
Yeah.
He is such a swell wife guy, except for that one time when he cheated on his previous wife with their children's nanny. But other than that, wife guy all the way. Now, despite all of this over-the-top propaganda to help Kamala Harris, she whined about the challenge during an audio town hall last week.
One of the biggest challenges that I face is mis and disinformation. Mm-hmm. And it's purposeful because it is meant to convince people that they somehow should not believe that the work that I have done has occurred and has meaning.
She's been the Democratic nominee for less than 3 months. Any quote-unquote challenge of disinformation that she may face doesn't hold a candle to the 8 years of propaganda lies leveled at Donald Trump. Recently, CBS provided yet another example of the front line of propaganda wars. First, they aired this answer from Kamala Harris in a promo for their interview with her on 60 Minutes.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
Okay, I don't know about you, but I need a translator. I have no clue as what she just said, and I don't think she does either. That's why, for the actual broadcast of the 60 Minutes interview, she magically gave a completely different answer to the question.
It seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Okay, now this past Sunday, CBS, after 2 weeks, claimed they had just simply shortened her reply for the 60 Minutes episode for time. But it is still a deceptive edit. And CBS still refuses to simply release the full transcript of the 40-minute interview. The guidelines in CBS's own handbook states, quote, answers to different questions may not be combined to give the impression of one continuous response. We cannot create an answer merely because we wish the subject had said it better. Well, CBS apparently definitely wished she had said it better and apparently ignored their own standards in the process. Not that we should be surprised. This is all run-of-the-mill. But things are about to change. Now, 2 months ago, in another area of propaganda for the network, a senior director of standards at CBS News emailed all staffers with instructions that they are not to refer to Jerusalem as being in Israel because its status is disputed. No, it's not. And yet these elitist eggheads cannot grasp why half the voting public doesn't want the left running the country. In fact, they continue to invent new academic explanations on why someone might vote for Donald Trump. This is all part of the ratcheting up of dangerous propaganda. Now, I want to show you something that appeared last week in the left-wing media outlet Salon, where Dr. Gary Slutkin, formerly with the World Health Organization, gives the following diagnosis, and I quote, "I understand MAGA as an epidemic disease, infecting many through what I call brain flaws. It's not their fault. There are brain pathways for copying and following others in the cortex, dopamine system, and pain centers to motivate conformity and violence. This is a movement of violence. Violence is a disease, and specifically a contagious disease. The disease spreads through these brain processes. The MAGA movement is a dangerous and lethal syndrome of what I describe as authoritarian violence disorder. Donald Trump is a massive super spreader. The contagion and the moral disengagement it causes provokes cruelty and disobedience." Well, my job is done here. We've got an expert. We got a doctor who has spoken. If you vote for Trump, it's because you have an epidemic disease. You have a flawed brain. Well, if I only had a brain. This is where the left's propaganda takes a very dark and dangerous turn. This is unprecedented rhetoric about a U.S. presidential candidate. This is incredible. For the side that prides itself on empathy for the supposed oppressed, it shows a total lack of empathy for why tens of millions of Americans might choose to vote differently. Okay, let me show you something that happened today, and this is where it takes a dark turn. We have all kinds of terrorists that have come in from our open borders. There are rumors that weapons of mass destruction have been smuggled across our borders, shoulder fire rockets. We have Iran and Iranians that are here in the country that wish to kill Donald Trump. And now we have people thinking that he's Hitler. But they haven't stopped. This just happened today. Watch.
So yesterday we learned that Donald Trump's former chief of staff, John Kelly, a retired four-star general, confirmed that while Donald Trump was president, he said he wanted generals like Adolf Hitler had. Donald Trump said that because he does not want a military that is loyal to the United States Constitution. He wants a military that is loyal to him. It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans. All of this is further evidence for the American people of who Donald Trump really is.
I've never heard anything like that. I find that absolutely amazing. Now, I want to show you how propaganda works. When I first heard this, somebody said, "Have you heard the Kamala Harris quote that she just gave?" I think she gave it in front of the White House. Well, it's not the White House. I believe this is the vice president's mansion. But notice the picture here. The picture is Kamala Harris in the middle with the two presidential mics and the seal of the vice president of the United States, the American flag, and the flag of the vice president. This is this is not a campaign. This is the United States vice president informing you that Hitler is on the way. Will they not stop at anything? Controlling elites, especially those at the helm of the propaganda industrial complex, think this way. And don't think it's a mistake. They have all of the experts like Cass Sunstein nudge. They have behavioral scientists behind all of this. You are being played like a cheese in a maze, like a piece of cheese in a maze, and you are the mouse. Earlier this year, a Rasmussen survey divided respondents between elites and the general public. They defined elites as Americans who have at least one postgraduate degree and earn over $150,000 a year. They also polled a separate group of what they called super elites, who were graduates of Ivy League and other elite colleges. Here's what they found. 47% of elites and 55% of super elites believe the government allows Americans, quote, too much individual freedom. Now, this is astounding. What has happened to the liberal part of a liberal left? With a major propaganda operation, censorship also goes hand in hand. And I want to look at the aspect particularly about censorship in the propaganda wars next. I was voting with my daughter. It was her first chance to vote for anybody, but president for sure. And we were standing in line. It took us about an hour to vote here in Texas. And she said, Dad, what is this really all about? What's it really at stake? And I said, it's the difference between life and death, freedom or slavery. And she said, really? And I said, yeah, life or death, freedom or slavery. If you lose freedom of speech and the First Amendment, you're a slave. If you choose to vote for the Democrats, they had abortion vans in front of their convention where they were giving away free abortions. Who does that? Choose life. I want to talk to you about what we do with preborn. Preborn is a ministry that actually cares about the child and the mom. You're saving two people in this because most women don't want to have the abortion. They just feel trapped. They have no place to turn. Well, the power of ultrasound combined with God's love doubles a baby's chance at life. One ultrasound is $28. 5 is $140. If you had the means and you would consider a leadership gift, all tax deductible, to save babies in a big way, your tax deductible donation of $5,000 sponsors the entire network for 24 hours. That helps rescue 200 babies. I don't know, kind of feels good. Dial pound 250, say the keyword baby. Choose life. Pound 250, keyword baby, or go to preborn.com/Glenn. Okay, do you remember the first thing that the Harris and Biden administration did when they got in? They shut the military down because they wanted to find all the extremists. What I just showed you, that clip of Kamala, that is the beginning of an all-out assault on our military if Donald Trump wins. If Donald Trump wins, watch for them to go after the military and say they are not loyal to the Constitution. This is the way they work. Now, if you say somebody is Hitler, you have to respond. You have to have the free speech to say, no, he's not, and here's why. But this is where censorship comes in. Propaganda operations, as well as censorship, they go hand in hand, and you'll read about it in Propaganda Wars. It's available now. I encourage you to get it. It is chock full of vital information, especially for the intense election season. There's a warning in there about something that could happen right before the election, and you need to be aware of it. It's a resource that you'll want to return to as you navigate the powerful forces that I describe in the book. The propaganda industrial complex, it is real. And if we lose this fight, I fear voices like mine will be gone, and you will be the source of truth. How do you find it? Now, censorship, propaganda, hand in hand. We experienced this during World War I under the quasi-dictatorship of Woodrow Wilson. It was America's first major foray into government propaganda, and with it came a truly frightening level of censorship by the federal government through the Espionage and Sedition Acts of 1917 and 18. For the full story on that, make sure you catch episode number 3 of my history podcast series called The Beck Story. Now, censorship is in the DNA of progressivism. So anytime speech pops up that doesn't align with their narrative, it brings out the true dictator colors. Here is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz in late 2022.
I think we need to push back on this. There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
That is the point of the First Amendment. Your freedom of speech is to question the government, to question what's happening in your republic. For the most part, even so-called hate speech is also protected by the First Amendment. And here's why. Because one person's common sense statement could be construed as hate speech by another person. Example, try to make the argument that there are only two sexes, male and female. Try to do that. In many circles, that is considered hate speech. So far, at least, our system has defaulted to broad freedom when it comes to speech, rather than favoring one side's definition of hate speech. But the Democratic Party leaders are trying to change that. Tim Walz made it clear he didn't know what he's talking about when he tried to make this argument recently in the vice presidential debate.
I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater.
I love this one.
That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
No, it's not actually. And by the way, I've screamed in a crowded theater, fire. Didn't arrest me. This is not the test anymore. It hasn't been for half a century. What he's talking about is a 1919, under Wilson, Supreme Court decision in a censorship case caused by the Woodrow Wilson administration. The court rightly rejected the fire in a crowded theater test in 1969. Now, that's not stopping progressive elites from trying to find another way to suppress mis- and disinformation, which are their new favorite buzzwords. They often jump to the fire in a crowded theater trope because that's their default for justification on government regulation of any speech they object to. It's all fire in a crowded movie theater. You can say that. Now, here's John Kerry recently at what else? The World Economic Forum panel on green energy, where he actually whined about having to put up with a nuisance of free speech in America.
It's really hard to govern today.
Yeah.
You can't, there's the referees we used to have to determine what's a fact and what isn't a fact are kind of, been eviscerated to a certain degree. There's a lot of discussion now about how you curb those entities in order to guarantee that you're going to have, some accountability on facts, et cetera. But look, if people go to only one source and the source they go to is sick, and has an agenda, and they're putting out disinformation, our First Amendment stands as a major block to the ability to be able to just, hammer it out of existence.
Yeah. Doesn't he sound like an advisor to King George? I love how these elites in their old age are letting their true intentions slip out, like the fact that he would like to hammer a place like Blaze Media out of existence. And he would get away with it as well if it wasn't for that darn First Amendment and those crazy kids in that mystery van. Honestly, how are these elites even American? This is a former presidential candidate and Secretary of State, somehow still an influential member of the progressive elite, who considers the First Amendment a major block to censoring the kinds of information he disapproves of. That is exactly what the free speech part of the First Amendment is supposed to be. Our protection against insanely oppressive zealots in government like John Kerry and his ilk. Speaking of insanely oppressive zealots, the propaganda industrial complex also rolled out Hillary Clinton recently to help with the anti-free speech messaging.
We should be, in my view, repealing something called Section 230, which gave, platforms on the internet immunity because they were thought to be just pass-throughs, that they shouldn't be judged for the content that is posted. But we now know that that was an overly simple view, that if the platforms, whether it's Facebook or Twitter X or Instagram or TikTok, whatever they are, if they don't moderate and monitor the content, we lose total control. I couldn't agree with you more. We need to remove the immunity from liability, and we need to have guardrails. We need regulation.
Regulation makes the world go around, doesn't it? Note she said, if they, meaning big tech companies, don't moderate, we lose total control. Yeah. And that's what the First Amendment is supposed to do. By the way, whenever any of these wannabe dictators say moderate, they mean, or moderate, they mean censor. Not moderation, censor. Now, we know that for a fact, based on all of the evidence of the Biden White House and the communication with these companies about censoring content they didn't like. Here's where the rubber meets the road. Donald Trump has talked about maybe we should take their license. First of all, ABC doesn't have a license. The local stations do, so you can't do that. The president has no place to go on that. However, not only has Kamala Harris and her ilk talked about censoring and regulating, they do it. Here's her call to get rid of Section 230. That would basically end platforms like Twitter X, which is exactly what the left, now in collusion with Harris's campaign and the Socialist Party, now in control in England, are trying to do. 2 weeks ago, a guy named Carlos Maza, who used to work for Media Matters and Vox, perfectly encapsulated the left's exploding propaganda about the need to control speech, except for his own, of course. He said, quote, "Free speech was and is an unmitigated disaster. Every piece of evidence points to the fact that we need really aggressive government regulation of speech platforms. The free market doesn't work, and it never will." You want that guy near any candidate? Anybody in power? I don't know if you're aware of this, but there are utopian communist options available to all of these people, and they're just a plane ride away. Should we send them a ticket to Cuba? Every week now seems to bring a new excuse for the left to pile on with their propaganda about mis- and disinformation. Hurricanes Helene and Milton led several House Democrats to send a letter demanding even more action from big tech companies to stop the spread of misinformation and conspiracy theories. I was on the ground. I saw it with my own eyes. Now, they want them to enhance fact-checking partnerships and strengthen algorithms to flag and prevent the spread of harmful conspiracy theories. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with strengthening algorithms? And how exactly would the algorithm figure out what a conspiracy theory is? Oh, that's easy. The government will say. The propaganda industrial complex, brought this problem on themselves because of their complete lack of integrity. But without integrity, we're going to decide. I mean, here's 3 cases for you. Trump-Russia collusion fantasy, the Hunter Biden laptop scandal, and COVID. The government invented conspiracy theories in each of these cases. The very last thing we need is government big tech, a cabal deciding what is or is not true. Remember, the left wants you to believe a man can become a woman and vice versa. That crowd is going to be the truth referee? No. But just a few weeks ago, the Biden-Harris administration, through the State Department, announced yet another $100 million public-private partnership focused on AI and disinformation. Now, who are their partners? Well, Amazon and Anthropic, Google, IBM, Meta, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and OpenAI. Oh, well, gee, calling that the propaganda industrial complex seems a bit of an exaggeration, right? And by the way, 2 of the partners in this latest initiative, Google and OpenAI, hosted a major fundraiser for the Kamala Harris campaign, a campaign that even the LA Times will not endorse. To suggest that more initiatives and regulation from a government that is dysfunctional and big tech, which is not really for your family, will increase public trust is delusional. It's propaganda. We don't need more fact checkers, better algorithms. We don't need AI. We need people who actually tell the truth. Back in a minute with your role in the propaganda wars and how you can do my job, how you can uncover the truth. If this election goes the way I hope it does, and I think the way you hope it does, it could be a major turning point because it's all coming undone for the left. And their hold on society through this propaganda industrial complex, which also includes big companies, is about to slip through their fingers. For 10 years now, Patriot Mobile has been America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. They're a proud supporter of this show. We're proud to partner with them. Patriot Mobile offers dependable nationwide coverage, giving you the ability to access all three major networks, which means you get exactly the same coverage that you've been accustomed to, without funding all the leftist garbage that you and I are so tired of. When you switch to Patriot Mobile, you're sending a message that you support freedom of speech, religious freedom, the sanctity of life, the Second Amendment, our military, our veterans, our first responder heroes. Their 100% U.S.-based customer service team is going to make switching so easy for you. You'll keep your number or your phone, or you can upgrade, one or both. Their team will help you find the best plan for your needs. You're going to save a buttload of money. PatriotMobile.com/Beck or call 972-PATRIOT. Do it right now. You'll get a free month of service when you use the offer code BECK. Don't get fooled by the other providers pretending to share your values or having the same coverage. They don't and they can't. So join me. Switch to America's only Christian conservative mobile provider, PatriotMobile.com, PatriotMobile.com/Beck, or call 972-PATRIOT. All right, the presidential election is less than 2 weeks away. All signs are pointing to an extremely close finish to the race. And you know what that means. A tidal wave of potential controversy, delays, disputed results, lawsuits, rumors, and false reports about all of it. No matter what happens, post-election calm is essential. We, this audience, must lead the way on being peaceful and rational regardless of the outcome, because the left will not be, especially if Donald Trump wins. Technology is making it harder than ever to know what is true and what isn't. This is the most frequently asked question of me. How do I know who to trust? Well, how do we navigate it? Here. I want to give you some simple ways to test information that I and my research team use every day. We've developed over the years. It's not really brain surgery, but I explain all of these in my new book, Propaganda Wars, which I think you'll find really helpful in guarding yourself against lies heading into this election. But let me hit just a few of the highlights. I think we're going to hit 7 of them here. First thing you have to do is the liar-liar test. How do you trust? Well, when someone in a media source lies to you, you have to remember that. Evaluate them with a higher level of scrutiny going forward. Basically, they have to earn your trust back with interest. An apology or a loud correction helps this. Now, this applies to all sources, even if they're on your side of the political aisle. All of these do. The overarching goal must always be to find the truth, not the thing that we would like to be true, but the truth. A good source will be willing to publish the truth even when it conflicts with its own ideological views. In 2020, multiple media outlets, including the New York Times, Washington Post, along with President Biden, and 51 current and former government officials all lied knowingly about the authenticity of the Hunter Biden laptop. And of course, lying about a story that major came on top of their previous giant lie about collusion between Donald Trump and Russia. Now, those who lied about both stories, I don't trust at all. And not many, if any, actually apologized and then worked hard to correct that. Many of them are still saying that. The next one, how do I trust and who do I trust? You take the what is a woman test. Let's say you're reading something an expert is talking about on any topic. Try to find out what that expert's position is on an issue where there is zero doubt about what the correct answer is. Now, it could be, nuclear war is winnable. Nope. But the big one here, and you'll find it everywhere, if they cannot accurately tell the difference between a man and a woman, then the source is definitely unreliable. Like most mainstream media, NBC has been flunking this test for years, but they accidentally undermined their support of the transgender ideology last year with an article that I love titled, "Inside the Online World of People Who Think They Can Change Their Race." The article argues that it is impossible to change your race, but then quotes a transgender activist who claims that's totally different from you trying to change your sex. Okay, not a trustworthy source. The third is what I call the egg-throwing gorilla test. Now, this is a reference to Clown World, and I describe Clown World. We're living in it, but I describe Clown World in the first chapter of the book. This is a Clown World scenario that actually happened when Larry Elder ran for California governor in 2021. How do I know if this person I can trust to tell me the truth? Now, Larry Elder, as you know, happens to be black. He was attacked relentlessly as being racist. And an LA Times reporter claimed Elder had a white supremacist worldview. So a woman even went to one of Elder's rallies wearing a gorilla mask and then threw eggs at him. When a bias is this obviously backward, the source is untrustworthy. Next, beware the bias test. When people that publish things that go against their own interests, then it's more likely to be true. And this counts in credibility for other stories. This is why Michael Schellenberger is such a reliable source. He's a longtime environmentalist, and yet his reporting in recent years on green energy corruption and failures means it's more likely that he's telling the truth. Same thing, I think, with RFK. RFK, he was an icon of the Democratic Party. Because he said what he said, he saw the Democratic Party turn on him, and he said, these people are dangerous. He had nothing to gain and everything to lose. I think you can trust some of the things he says. Now, the next one is the bloodthirsty tyrant test. This is another simple guideline. If someone supports or calls for violence in any way, you should not trust the information coming from that source without a lot of corroborating evidence, such as a warped sense of morality. That's, I think, a pretty good indicator that they might also struggle with truth-telling from time to time. Over the last 8 years, mainstream media has almost universally downplayed the violence and threats from Antifa. They almost always quote Mark Bray, who wrote a book about Antifa and was the organizer for Occupy Wall Street and that movement. But if you think your cause is righteous, so righteous, it justifies rioting, violence, burning cities down, then I don't trust you. Number 6 is really tough. That's the original source test. This one is tough because it takes patience, it takes digging. But whenever possible, don't take it firsthand. Don't take it from like Kamala Harris saying that. Who said that? Well, we know it was General Kelly. Once we know the original source, we can ask, is that guy trustworthy? If you hear something reported as absolute fact and is repeated verbatim by multiple outlets, try to find out where that fact originated. We talk about this extensively in the book, and we give you a very, very solid example of why you cannot trust something that is everywhere and quoted exactly if you don't know the original source. If a media outlet doesn't mention the source of that fact that they share, that's a red flag. If they do mention the source, try to go to that source and see if they mention it, that's where they got the fact, that it's the same thing that everybody is saying. This message of tracing will also often lead you to the original source, which will then help you determine the trustworthiness of the information. We also have the crazy uncle test, but I'm running out of time. That's worth the read. It's worth the price of the book. I'm sharing these with you because you need to be a purveyor of truth at all times. You need to know how to find the truth. The bottom line of all these tests is to have a very healthy dose of skepticism when dealing with our massive, jumbled, biased information ecosystem. I put two other points up here. One, be childlike. What does that mean? Well, what do children always ask? Always, no matter what you're talking about. Why? 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 You must ask why. Why is this story coming out now? Why are they reporting it? Who gains from this story? Okay. The other is be Reagan. Trust, yet verify, even from your friends or trusted sources. Now you'll say, Glenn, I've got a family and a job. Who has time to apply all these tests and play citizen journalist? I get it. I get it. And you're right. You're not always going to have time to do this. But individuals are going to have to do a lot more thinking and digging for themselves as technology and the propaganda industrial complex make it harder and harder to get to the truth. As you use these tests, it's kind of like exercising a muscle. It'll build up your truth detection muscle. It will develop a personal shorthand method for sniffing out the truth. And the more you do this, the more you will be able to go, that's not a trusted source, that's not a trusted source, this one is, this one is. Now, I'll be back with the co-author of my book, the partner that did a lot of the digging up of truth, the co-author of Propaganda Wars, Justin Haskins, next. All right, you know how if you eat non-nutritional food all the time, day after day, you're going to probably be pretty unhealthy, maybe miserable at the same time. Well, it turns out that the same rule applies to your dog. Isn't that crazy? If you're feeding him kibble food, he's not getting all the nutrition that, got baked out of it. So, that's usually when they're eating poop and stuff. You're like, what are you eating? They're not getting what they need. And their body is saying that. That's why you should give him rough greens. It's not a dog food. It's a supplement developed by naturopathic Dr. Dennis Black that you sprinkle on the dog's food. And it contains all the good stuff that your dog needs for a happier, healthier life. Things like probiotics and antioxidants. Because remember, brown food is dead food. You need the green stuff. Well, the folks at Rough Greens want you to try it. And they don't want you to have to pay for it until you know your dog will like it as much as Uno does. You can go to roughgreens.com/Beck. They're going to give you your first trial bag for free. All you pay for is shipping. So get your first Rough Greens Jumpstart trial bag. Just go to roughgreens.com/Beck or call 833-GLENN33. That's 833-GLENN33. Call them today. I want to introduce you again to my co-author of Propaganda Wars. He is also the guy who leads the research team of really, really bright, hardworking people to get us all of the information for these books. His name is Justin Haskins. Hi, Justin.
Hi, Glenn.
There are a couple of things that I'm worried about here in the last few weeks of this election. And the first one goes from anytime now until January 20th, and that's assassination. And we're seeing the propaganda against Donald Trump ratcheting up. That's a very real possibility. The other thing, and we found this to be true in several countries, there's 4 billion people voting this year in the West, and we have seen the appearance of deep fakes. Explain how it has been working in other elections around the country.
One of the most shocking things from our research has been that over the past 2 years, there has been an incredible increase in the number of deepfakes in foreign elections. In countries like Slovakia, for example, where you had a deepfake in a high-profile election just a couple of days before the election when there was a moratorium on candidates being allowed to defend themselves in the event of a scandal happening. We've seen them in America, too, in Chicago, in the mayoral race in 2023 between Brandon Johnson and Paul Vallis. We saw another deepfake scandal happen this year in 2024 in the Democratic Party primary in the state of New Hampshire involving Joe Biden, a deep fake of him that was sent around by another Democrat, which initially was blamed on Republicans. These deep fake scandals are tearing people apart in the countries where they're happening around the world. And unfortunately, we're in a position right now in the United States where if a deepfake scandal were to occur on Election Day or just before Election Day, and we didn't have enough time as a society to figure out whether it's true or not, it could have real consequences for the election and for how people view the validity of the candidate who wins the election.
Because once you can't stuff that genie back in the bottle. And I'm very concerned, and I said on radio today, do not believe anything that comes out in video and audio in the last 2 days, even if it's on your side. Don't believe it. If it's too good to be true, it's probably a deep fake. We can't spread these things because you'll never put that genie back in the bottle. You'll never reach everyone and convince that that was, no, a deep fake. And we're seeing this happen around the world.
Right.
In Taiwan, it also happened right before the election.
Yes.
So we have to be really careful. The other thing, I had Liz Truss on, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, today, and I was talking to her about the collusion that is happening now with the ruling Labour Party and Kamala Harris on a couple of fronts, free speech and winning elections. Go into this a little bit because we talk about this collusion, and here is a real-time example happening right now.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. In the book, we dedicate an entire chapter to how foreign governments and foreign political parties are actively working in the United States, not just in elections, but outside of elections, to completely transform our society. It's usually to work with left-wing groups to try to move the country further to the left. And this is a great example of it. 100 people were just sent to the United States, or they announced that the Labour Party in the UK is sending 100 people to the United States to help Kamala Harris win the election in key swing states, including in Pennsylvania, for example. North Carolina, I believe, is another one. This is obviously collusion. There are also key people in the British Labour Party are working with Kamala Harris.
No, that's just key people. He's either the chief of staff or chief or chief advisor to the prime minister, who has created an organization that we helped create, the Biden-Harris administration, that is censoring people and pushing for censorship. And they are in the Labour Party, right with the prime minister, and they are also colluding with the Harris party to kill X, their words, not mine, to kill X, but also to stifle him. They're working together in Brazil and now here in America. Yeah. We have like 15 seconds. Last word on any of this.
Yeah, I think for those who are interested in saving their country, this is the book for you. It's not just about providing you with information that you need. It's also about helping you become an active part of solving the problem. Join the propaganda war. Help us fight back and save the country. That's why we wrote this book.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Glenn.
I really appreciate it. We will see you tomorrow on radio, and then I head to Arizona to help the president win. Good night.